two, three.
Let's talk about abusing supplements. Um, how can something that even if you pee most of it out, some of it still stays, doesn't it? And
No,
isn't it,
that's not
why is
true.
it not good for you?
It's not the point that you pee it out. The point is, what is it doing before you pee it out?
Okay.
And I'll give you some examples. I had a person last week on bad osteoporosis. The reason was taking vitamin B1 in excess.
Mm.
Vitamin B1 pulls the calcium right out of your teeth and pulls it out of your bone.
Mm.
That's
Hmm.
if you're taking it in too high of an amount and
Mm.
not taking it maybe with enough calcium to balance it effects. B1 is a great vitamin. It's a miracle vitamin. And when
Mm.
you use it properly, and when you're giving it to someone who actually is deficient in it or has a greater need for it. But you have to know how to balance that.
Mm. So we should just go buy these supplements. We should have someone like you
Right.
that
That's the
tells us
moral
what
of the
we need.
story. The moral of the story is before you take tons of supplements, get tested because you could throw yourself dramatically out of balance.
Welcome to the Transform Your Mind to Transform Your Life radio, podcast, and television show. I'm your host, Life Coach Myrna Young, and sitting in the guest chair today is Dr. Michael Biamonte. I'm trying to do my Italian here. All right, and Dr. Biamonte is going to talk, and I are going to be talking on the topic the truth about supplementation, deficiencies, and the gut mind connection. How many of you know that the gut is the second brain? So I love the gut mind connection. Welcome, Dr. Diamante.
Thank you. Happy to be here with you.
All right, you're very welcome. All right, so let me give you guys a brief introduction. Today's guest is Dr. Michael Biamonte, as I said. He's the founder of the Biamonte Center for Clinical Nutrition and a pioneer in advanced nutritional testing. With over 30 years of clinical experience, Dr. Biamonte brings aerospace level technology into human health to uncover why so many people stay sick despite doing everything right. This episode may completely change how you think about supplements, medicine, and your gut. Yes, I'm already transformed, and I even haven't started the conversation just by the introduction and the promise.
All right. This is good.
Yes,
Makes my work easier.
it makes your work easy, right? Yes, you don't have to sell it much. All right, so as we start off, Dr. Diamante, what led you into clinical nutrition, and at what point did you realize that conventional approaches were missing something critical?
I went to naturopathic school in the early 80s, and what I studied primarily was the relationship between nutrition and disease. And when I got out of naturopathic school, because computers were just coming out back then, I'm giving away my age here. I had this idea because I was an expert at interpreting blood testing. So I could look at a blood test, a standard blood test, and I could tell you what deficiencies or nutritional imbalances a person had, even though that wasn't what was on the test. What was on the
Mm,
test was your standard liver enzymes, cholesterol, and all this. But I had studied physiology to such a degree that I understood that every one of those chemistries, like albumin and globulin, would be regulated by the amount of lecithin or choline and inositol in the person's bloodstream. So I could transpose the standard tests the doctor would look at for disease purposes into what nutrients this person was low in or imbalanced in or too high in. So with that, I had this idea to computerize this knowledge. I wanted to have a computer program that I could teach everything I knew to the program and then
mm,
just simply input the person's chemistries into the computer and press a button and have the thing spit out a whole report that would be just be like in seconds compared to me spending a half an hour going through their test.
Sounds great.
I had this idea, right? So I
Yeah.
was going around in those days telling people about this and trying to recruit people to help me. And I was in a health food store in New York, in I think it was in Roslyn, New York. And I was telling the people there, and this woman turned to me and she says, "You have to talk to Dr. Robert Santoro. He's already doing this." And I said,
Wow.
"Really?" And she gave me
Hmm,
his number.
hmm,
So I called this gentleman up and it changed my life. He ended up being the fellow who developed the life support systems on the lunar module. He was an aerospace physiologist and a naturopathic doctor, and he was working at Grumman. And what he was doing at Grumman at the time was developing a computer software system that could analyze the results of the astronauts' blood work in
hmm,
terms of nutrition, so that if the astronauts were in the space station for months and months, they could do a blood test and then see what vitamins the astronauts needed.
hmm,
So I got along with this guy very famously for about 30 years. But initially, I came to Grumman to work with him as an independent contractor to help develop this computer system. And
hmm,
we worked on the system for about 5 or 6 years to the point where it was up and running enough to where it could be used. And we started to use it in private practice. And we also had other medical doctors and nutritionists using the system. And then it reached a point where it was getting too expensive and Grumman dropped us. So they let us have all the information. So
hmm,
in my private practice, then I was testing hundreds of people with this system and I was looking at what was going. So we get an intake form from them and they would have all their symptoms, their medical history, their complaints, and everything they were taking, all the supplements they were taking. And I was shocked at how many people were taking supplements that not only didn't they need, but that were throwing them further out of balance.
hmm, hmm,
My favorite story, which I probably told 1 million times, is at this point in time, I was developing a reputation, even though I was only out of school a few years, but I was getting a reputation as being a detective for physical problems and nutrition problems.
that's a good label to have.
A detective, yeah. So I had
Yeah.
a chiropractor referred this medical doctor to me, and the medical doctor had this problem that sounded very strange. He had a really bad prostate problem. And
Hmm,
a few years prior, he had read in the medical literature that the mineral zinc was good for the prostate. So he
hmm,
started taking the zinc and his prostate problems went away. And now all of a sudden they came back. So he was at a loss. The chiropractor didn't know what to tell him. So the man came to see me and I started asking him questions. And it turns out it was as simple as that. He had bad prostate problems, started taking zinc, prostate got better. And now all of a sudden the prostate problem was coming back. And he said it, and I never stopped taking the zinc, so I don't know why this happened. He was taking 50
hmm,
milligrams a day of zinc for
hmm,
years, and he was fine
hmm.
with his prostate. And he said now it started to come back, and I doubled the zinc to 100 milligrams, and it got even worse.
Wow.
So I'm listening to this, and I said, you have to stop the zinc right now, and you have to start taking copper. And I
Oh.
did a test. I did a hair analysis test on him and a blood test, and I looked at his zinc and copper levels. And sure enough, he was taking the zinc for so long that he caused a copper deficiency because
Mm.
zinc and copper are antagonists. Now, me knowing all this stuff, I figured it out in
Right,
my head
right.
immediately. Zinc and copper antagonize each other, so they have to be in a certain balance. If you take too much of one, you cause a depletion of the other. So I
Mm.
theorized that this guy must have caused a copper deficiency. And the
Yeah.
interesting thing about copper is your body's natural antibiotic.
Okay.
Copper as a mineral is used in your immune system by white blood cells to attack bacteria. So he had driven his copper so low that the weak point in his body, his prostate, developed a prostate infection.
Mm.
So I said, no more zinc, start taking copper. And I gave him a pretty high, stiff dose to take initially. I said, take this for a week and then call me. And meanwhile, we'll get these tests done and we'll see. So a week later, he calls me and he says, I don't know if I'm crazy or you're crazy, but my prostate is totally cleared up just from taking this copper. And I don't know how the hell that happened. What happened? So I explained to him what I just explained to you, that
Yeah.
copper is your body's own natural antibiotic, and you took so much zinc for so long without taking any copper that you depleted your copper, and there you go.
Wow. I have never heard of copper as a supplement. Where do you find that?
Oh, just about any health food store.
Really?
Yep.
Wow. Well, I guess I get my drugs from the drugstore, and I've never seen copper there. Wow. I see zinc, but not copper.
Well,
Well,
zinc is
that's
more
amazing.
popular and people know more about zinc. They
Right.
don't know as much about copper. Here's
Oh,
enter the problem. The promotion and the um, mass media
uh-huh.
tends to promote supplements. And it becomes a joke after a while. Like I've been in this field since the 80s, and I can tell you every decade, nutritionists, when they get together and have a beer, they joke about this. Every 80s, every 10 years or so, every decade, there's a nutrient that's the nutrient of the decade.
Mhm.
Back in the 80s, it was vitamin E, was the nutritional thing of the. Then it became coenzyme Q10 after that. Then it was magnesium. Then it became fish oils. And then it became AOL. AOA, a lot of people take alpha lipoic acid because now they found out that it's very good for a lot of problems you could have with overuse syndromes in your joints and your tendons and whatnot. So every decade there is a nutrient that they're pushing. And that's what people see on TV. So they get brainwashed
Yeah.
into
Yeah.
into hearing, well, this nutrient is good for this and this. Let me take it. But
Yeah.
I never got tested for it. And that's what I specialize in doing. And I've been doing for the last almost 40 years is I've been specializing in testing people to find out what they really need,
What they really need. Yeah.
not what's
That's amazing.
popular on TV. So I believe the doctor of the future is going to do two things. Person
Mhm.
comes in to see him, he's going to assess everything, get the person's history, their symptoms, and he's going to run two types of tests. He's going to run one test, which is a genetic test, which are available now, a genetic test that tells you what you're prone to, because that's what a
Mm-hmm.
genetic test does.
Mm-hmm.
And he's going to run another functional test that tells you in real time what's happening with
It's happening
your
right
body,
now.
right?
Wow.
So the real time test is going to tell you what you're deficient in, or what you're lacking, or maybe what you're toxic in. And the genetic test is going to tell you what you're prone to have happen.
Mm-hmm.
And he's going to look at these two viewpoints. And that's how he's going to navigate putting a health program together for the person.
So you think that's going to happen in conventional medicine or just functional
In
medicine?
about 50 years, maybe in conventional medicine. In functional medicine, we're
Didn't think
already
so.
heading on that path.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
it's very
And I can
important that
tell
people
that
understand this.
I can tell you're a functional medicine doctor just by
True.
from talking to you.
But
Right.
it's important that people understand this because I get patients coming to me all the time and saying, you know, I did these tests. I have cholesterol problems. I have this problem. I have that
Yeah,
problem.
yeah.
I'm going to get cancer. And I say, ho, ho, whoa, well, slow down a second. Now, what was the test you did? It turns out they did a genetic test that told them they had genetic tendencies towards these problems, but they
Mm-hmm.
don't have any test or diagnosis saying they have the problem now, because
Right,
that's the confusion. A genetic test shows you your genes and what
right.
potential gene weaknesses there are that could lead to these problems, but it doesn't mean you have the problem at that moment when you do the
Well,
test.
well, they should be told that because I know that.
Not
I
all
know that I've
people
heard
are.
about this APO4 gene or something. I might be saying it wrong, but that's the one that tells that you're predisposed to Alzheimer's. That's the only one that I
Right,
know.
right.
Right. Right. And I know that there is another one that, Angelina Jolie cut off her breast because she had something
She
that
had the gene for
predisposed her
breast
to
cancer.
cancer. What was
Right.
that?
For breast cancer. Yes.
Right, for breast cancer. So those are the ones that I know. But yeah, when they're taking these tests, they should be told that and not scare people.
No, not
But
always. Not
wow, I
always.
mean, your story about the zinc and the copper, it's amazing. I heard this recently. I'm not going to call the name because this is your interview, but I heard recently that one of the doctors, very prominent now, says that um, supplements are a waste of time. It's just expensive urine. And I'm one of the ones that take all these supplements. I take about 12 of them. I take everything because I learned
Yeah,
from Deepak Chopra 20
right.
years ago that supplements are good. So I take them all. And now I think I told you before we started recording, I'm looking at these things. I'm still taking them because I bought them and I'm thinking
Hmm.
maybe I'm not going to buy them anymore. So let's talk about abusing supplements. Um, how can something that even if you pee most of it out, some of it still stays, doesn't it? And
No,
isn't it,
that's not
why is
true.
it not good for you?
It's not the point that you pee it out. The point is what is it doing before you pee it out?
Okay.
I'll give you some examples. I had a person last week on bad osteoporosis. The reason was taking vitamin B1 in excess.
Mm.
Vitamin B1 pulls the calcium right out of your teeth and pulls it out of your bone.
Mm.
That's
Hmm.
if you're taking it in too high of an amount and
Mm.
not taking it maybe with enough calcium to balance it effects. B1 is a great vitamin. It's a miracle vitamin. And when
Mm.
you use it properly, and when you're giving it to someone who actually is deficient in it or has a greater need for it. But you have to know how to balance that.
Mm. So we should just go buy these supplements. We should have someone like you
Right.
that
That's the
tells us
moral
what
of the
we need.
story. The moral of the story is before you take tons of supplements, get tested because you could throw yourself dramatically out of balance
For the
by
balance.
taking things that
Right.
you don't know you need. Because every vitamin and every
Probably
mineral
true.
has an effect on another. All vitamins can either help a mineral or another vitamin or deplete it. So
Hmm.
I could go down a list of things. For instance, most people don't know vitamin C lowers your copper levels. If you
Mm.
take too much vitamin C, you get a copper deficiency. Same thing with zinc, as we said before.
This before, right?
Magnesium will lower your calcium, so will vitamin B1, so will iron. It can suppress your calcium levels. Too much calcium will cause you to become anemic because it suppresses iron. And we could
Oh
just
my
go on and
goodness.
on and on like this
Wow,
for
and we can go
hours.
on and on and
We
on.
could go take every nutrient, and I can tell you what's the synergist to the nutrient, what's the antagonist to the nutrient. And if you're
Wow.
taking these things and you don't know the balance, you can end up in trouble.
Wow. And yet nobody tells us this. I
Well,
don't even think they know. Now, when
well,
you go to the doctor, they make you list all the vitamins that you're taking. I don't list them all because I list a lot of them. I take a lot of them, like I mentioned. I don't list them all. But I was wondering, why you need to know what supplements I'm taking? Like, what's the point? But
well, I
now I
don't
see the
know.
point.
I
Right.
don't know that they know that much about what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Usually, they want to know what supplements you're taking so they can blame your problems on the supplements and tell you to stop taking them. But yeah, to be honest
Right.
with you, that's not the doctors don't have much training in nutrition. They get
No.
about 5 hours, and it's
Right.
uh, mostly
Yeah,
dealing
I
with
know. There's no reason for me to tell them my supplements because you're
no,
right.
they don't
They're
really
not
know.
right. They're not telling me I should take this one or I should take that one. They just want me to list them all, and I didn't see the need for it. But all right, let's go back to the question that I asked though. Um, so what you're saying is supplements are not a waste of time. You just have to know which ones to take. You don't
It's
really,
like anything else,
it
really.
doesn't, it's not expensive urine. Let's make sure we,
That line is I heard that line back in the 80s when I was in nutrition school. Medical, that's a standard medical doctor line. You don't have to take supplements because it just makes expensive urine. It's a very obnoxious comment which shows the person's ignorant. Because if you start testing people, you will find that due to the toxicity we have in our environment that we didn't have 100 years ago, people definitely need vitamin supplements to help them
okay,
detoxify, where 100 years ago they didn't need them.
okay,
But
good. All right.
you're dealing with toxic food. Well, just listen to Robert F.K. Jr. for about an hour and you'll get the whole deal. You have a toxic environment, so you need supplements to manage that. But if you're
Okay.
taking supplements without knowing if you need them or which ones
Right.
you need, that's where you drive the car off the road.
Hmm. Got you. Got you. Got you. So, all right. So I love your tests that you do. Wow. And you personally do both of these tests right now, the genetic and the supplements, or you're saying that's coming down the road?
No, no, we've been doing them for years.
Oh,
They
wow.
exist. We've been doing them for years, and that's what every doctor should be. All functional doctors do these things. They don't always do them in an orderly manner, but
Hmm.
typically functional doctors do these tests, and all doctors should do these tests because it would be
Right.
preventative. And we're trying to make people healthier in America and prevent disease, and the way to do that would be to test people to see what's happening with them as far as nutrients. Now, part two of this is toxicity, which
Mm.
I touched on. The environment is so toxic, it's incredible. Autism exists because of how toxic the environment has become. We know
Mm.
now there are genetic identifiers of kids who are autistic, and all the genes that identify a kid as being autistic are genes which will tell you they can't detoxify correctly. They have bad methylation, they're bad detoxifiers. 100 years ago, that didn't matter and their nervous systems weren't challenged because 100 years ago you didn't have all the toxicity. You didn't have them getting
Oh,
vaccines that had thimerosal. You didn't necessarily have them getting fillings in their mouth that were filled with mercury. You didn't have all
right.
the toxicity, and so they weren't challenged. That's why the rate of autism has gone up and up and up. As the
Because of the
environment gets more
toxicity. Wow.
toxic, these
Hmm.
kids get overwhelmed by the toxicity. So one of the first things I do with a patient when they come to me is I test them for metal toxicities and chemical toxicities. I test them for both. Toxic metals are I can say this, are arguably behind 50% of all the illnesses that people have out there.
Mm.
Whatever the illness is, whatever the name you want to give it, there could be a toxic metal behind that. And because
Mm.
doctors don't test for toxic metals, people end up taking medications to cover up their symptoms, and they never find out what the real cause is. And again, this goes into the area of clinical ecology. This is what I consider myself as a clinical ecologist. That I
Hmm.
take the person, I test to see how their environment is affecting them, if there's toxicity in the environment that's overwhelming them, causing disease or illness. And I think that metals are a key thing to test for because metals are so sneaky, most people don't think of it.
Right.
Example, a woman who's worked for me in my office for 30 years, she had high blood pressure, she had all these problems. And when I traced it back with her, just because she had all these heavy metals, I found that when she was younger, she worked in a toy manufacturing plant. And her job was to make these holes in these metal uh, brackets so that they could put the toy together.
Hmm.
So she's drilling these holes 8 hours a day for years, and metal filings and dusts are flying all over the place. They didn't give her a mask. They didn't
Mm.
have her wear gloves.
Hmm.
So all this metal absorbed into her body.
Wow.
Another example, I have a patient who's in the automotive industry for years. His specialty was working with brake linings. Brake linings have heavy amounts of copper in there. So when
Mm.
he would, and he never wear gloves, he didn't wear a mask. So when he's playing with these brake linings, replacing them, there's all this copper filing and dust that absorbed through his skin. He was breathing it in. He became
Hmm.
copper toxic.
Mm. Right. The only one I've heard of is Tony Robbins talk about his mercury from eating tuna. But
Yeah,
that's the only one that I heard about. Right. I didn't know about all these other ones. Right.
they're
Yeah.
all over. But
They're all over. Right.
you could test if you test 50% of the people, you'll find that they have a heavy metal that they've
Wow.
acquired from either their drinking water, their bathing, their shower water, especially if you look at your sink and your tub or your shower, and you look at that the little silver grate, the round grate there.
Hmm.
If
Hmm.
that's colored orange or colored green, you have either iron in your water or too much copper.
Mm. Right. Yes. Well, I'm definitely going to come to you and get tested. I've been needing to do the food sensitivity ones. But now I guess I'll start with vitamins because, vitamins are very good for you. And I'm glad I don't have to chuck mine. All
Not until
right.
we see if you need
So
them or not.
what was that?
I said, not until we see if you need them or not.
Right. Exactly. Right. Right. Okay. But one of the things we wanted to concentrate on today was the gut-mind connection. So, what exactly is Candida, and why do traditional treatments often fail? And how does an imbalanced microbiome, no, I can't speak, affect both the body and the mind? And how are we putting these together with supplements?
Well, very good question. Your microbiome is basically the balance of bacteria throughout your intestinal tract. There's about 8 pounds of bacteria and microorganisms in your intestinal tract. And what's supposed to happen is you're supposed to have a lot of good microbes there. What we call the friendly ones or the probiotics. You hear the term probiotic. So
Yes,
the
I take those.
probiotic means for life in Latin.
Hmm.
So these are bacteria that help your body in many ways. They're your first line of defense for your immune system. They help your body manufacture vitamins. They help your body absorb vitamins and minerals. They also help your body regulate your neurotransmitters and your hormones. When your microbiome gets thrown off, typically by either eating tons of sugar, drinking too much alcohol, or taking other drugs, including prescription drugs, or by taking anything literally that could kill the friendly bacteria, which could include your standard antibiotics doctors give you, or even going in a swimming pool that's chlorinated and drinking too much of that water, getting too much of that chlorine will kill your biome. When the friendly bacteria is compromised, organisms which are hanging out there that are minor organisms that are kept under control, that are nasty, start to grow out of balance.
Mm.
And of them, Some of the most famous ones are Helicobacter pylori, known as H. pylori. That's the bacteria that causes stomach ulcers.
Mm.
And the other one is a yeast, which is called Candida
Yeah.
albicans.
Right.
Candida albicans is the same yeast that causes vaginal yeast infections in women, but
Mm-hmm.
more commonly it overgrows in your intestinal tract. And this is what typically happens to the person. Person's walking around minding his own business, ends up taking an antibiotic. The antibiotic kills his friendly bacteria, and now the candida starts to grow because there isn't friendly bacteria that'll control it. He starts to get tired, doesn't know why. He's fatigued. Now he notices he's gassy, he's farting, he's burping, he's having all these digestive problems. Then he's starting to forget things. He doesn't remember people's names. He doesn't remember. He walks
Brain
in a room. He
fog.
says, "Why
Right.
am I in the
Mm-hmm.
room? I don't remember." Then he could start getting rashes.
Mm.
And then if it gets really bad, he starts getting asthmatic. He starts getting food allergies that he never had before. And then when it's really hitting its peak and it's getting very bad, he develops something that's called leaky gut syndrome. And leaky
Mm.
gut syndrome is when this candida organism literally damages your intestinal lining and makes it too porous so that things in your bloodstream or in your intestines leak into your blood that shouldn't be there. So suddenly different germs and bacteria and undigested food leaks into your bloodstream and it causes all types of autoimmune reactions. The next thing you know, the guy's got rheumatoid arthritis. He
Oh
might
my
have
goodness.
Hashimoto's disease. He might have multiple sclerosis. He might have numerous autoimmune conditions going on. Then he becomes what we would call in the old days a universal reactor. Nowadays, a universal reactor is someone who's chemically intolerant, or they'll
Mm.
they'll talk about how they have different problems in their body where they're constantly inflamed, like they have fibromyalgia, or they have
Wow.
all types of problems, but they can't really go out much because they react
Mm.
to the environment. If they
Oh
were to
my
go to the
goodness.
supermarket and walk down the aisle where the cleaning solutions are, they'd have a booming headache. They can't
Mm.
go to a bar or a wedding because people are smoking and wearing perfume.
Wow.
So it's similar to a person who's living in a house filled with mold. It's a similar reaction.
Mm.
And in fact, it's related to that, which is something that's called sick building syndrome, is a person who lives in a house that has too much mold and they're sick all the time. And they
Mm.
notice they only feel better when they leave the house.
Mm.
Now, coincidentally, all those people who are so affected by the mold in their house are the same people who have candida. If you go to a house where the person's complaining that they have mold and they're sick, if there's five people living in the house, find the ones that are the most heavily affected by this, because you'll see one or two of them will say, "Nah, maybe once in a while I cough, but other than that, it doesn't bother me." She's the one who's really sick all the time. Well, that's the person who has candida overgrowth because
Mm.
they're super affected by the mold in the house.
Mm. Because the candida is,
There's a
go
mold already.
leaky
It's a
gut
it's a
and all that
similar.
stuff. Right.
Exactly.
Okay. Hmm.
Exactly.
Wow.
Now,
Okay.
how it affects the brain or the mind is that candida throws out all types of toxins into your bloodstream that affect you neurologically. Not only does it throw out mycotoxins, which are yeast-related toxins, it also produces alcohol. There are strains
Wow.
of candida that can produce so much alcohol the person could be legally intoxicated.
Wow.
Not to
Wow.
mention how it imbalances your hormones and your neurotransmitters. So right there, it's simple
Wow.
to understand why there's a gut-brain connection, you see.
Right. I know about the candida as far as yeast in the woman's, vagina. I mean, I'm a
Right.
woman, so I know that. But I don't think anyone has ever mentioned candida in the gut. And I've had several interviews with the microbiome and the probiotics and the gut-brain connection and leaky gut, and I know all those stuff. But I've never heard of candida being being a problem in the gut. So I'm trying
That's
to
the main
remember
That's actually the
where.
main place that is a problem. There was a book written by a Dr. Crook back in the 80s. He was
Mhm.
the first one to really come out and talk about this.
Okay.
So Crook
And
was his name, and he was the first person to really. He didn't have much of a solution for it, but at least he
yeah,
acknowledged it. And he said, "Here's what happens. Basically, what I just told you."
right. Wow. 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 Huh. So, you have a solution for this, right? You use technology that's originally designed for aerospace. That's the gentleman that you were talking about. By the way,
Yes, Dr.
when you were
Santoro.
talking about that, I am actually just reading this book now that's called Who Not How. And they talk about when, when you have a project, you don't have to worry about how you're going to do it. Just find who. And that doctor was your Hugh.
Yeah, he was. That's
And,
true.
and, and look how you found him talking in a
At a health food
grocery
store.
store.
Yep,
That's
yep.
amazing. Right. But anyway, so this doctor taught you about aerospace to analyze the human body. So how does this testing reveal that what standard lab work misses?
Well, what it's able to do is use about 2,000 algorithms when it looks at your lab work in order to figure out what's really happening in your body from the viewpoint of physiology and nutrition. Like the system would never say this man has cancer. The system would say he has cells that are mutating and abnormally or something like that. It speaks in physiology. So
Mm-hmm.
when you're speaking in physiology, it makes it easier to go back and look at what's wrong because you're not just putting a label of a disease on it. You're telling me what the exact process is that's
That's
happening in the
right,
body.
right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And this is how I ended up discovering Candida. I didn't know what Candida was. In 1987, we had hundreds of people going through this system, and I noticed that there was about 25 to 30% of the people who were going through the program who had strange reactions to vitamins. They would take the
Mm-hmm.
vitamins and get sick or some crazy thing. And when I would
Mm-hmm.
interview them, I found out the same thing was happening with their prescription medications. They were ending up on so many
Wow.
medications because they had so many side effects from the original medications that it was crazy. So I
Hmm.
volunteered to find out what was wrong with these people, and I found out they had Candida. And then to
Mm-hmm.
try to get them cured of it was a whole other story because sending them back to their doctors and telling them, tell your doctor you have Candida, get cured, and come back to us was naive because
Right.
I got phone calls and the patients were saying, the
They don't know
doctor
how to
says
do
there's
that.
no such thing as Candida. The doctor says everybody has Candida. I heard all these stories. So finally, I didn't know what to do. I
It's funny.
told these patients to go see two friends of mine in Manhattan, Dr. Robert Atkins and Dr. Ronald Hoffman. They were the two original functional medical doctors that probably ever. And
Mm.
they went to Dr. Hoffman, they went to Dr. Atkins. They called me and they said this was much better. They knew what you were talking about. And they said, and they put me on a diet and they put me on medicines and I felt good for a while, but then it all started coming back. And that's when I
Back. Mm.
dedicated myself to figuring out how you really get rid of this permanently. And that's all
Wow.
discussed in my book, The Candida Chronicles. I call it the
Okay.
Candida Chronicles because it chronicles my journey in figuring out how you get rid of this Candida, which
Wow.
is just keeps coming back. If you don't know how to get rid of it, it just keeps coming back and it gets worse because it
Wow.
mutates. It
Yeah.
mutates when it's exposed to when it's exposed to a drug that's supposed to kill it. Let's say person finds out they have Candida, they go to the doctor, he gives them this very popular antifungal called nystatin. After about 2 months or so on this drug, you'll go through feeling like it's gone, you'll be elated, and then you're going to feel it all gradually coming back because the longer you're on the medication, the Candida starts to mutate and it starts to become drug resistant. So the
Yeah.
medicine no longer
Huh.
has an effect, but the symptoms
Wow.
come back.
Wow. Hmm. That's interesting. So I'm assuming there's a good end to the story that there is a way to get rid of it permanently.
Absolutely,
Okay.
it's all in my book, but the key
Okay.
thing is that when you're killing the Candida or attacking it, you have to use medicines that you can switch around every few days. That's
Right.
one a
So they wouldn't
simple
get
thing.
resistant. Right.
Exactly. It's
Okay.
simple, but it's what works.
Hmm. And you know that I'm aware of that, in your story, the antibiotic starts the thing, right?
Right.
And it's one of the reasons because I wasn't aware that the candida was in the gut, but I'm aware that you can get a yeast infection from these, um, antibiotics that are broad based. So, whenever I go to the doctor and um, I have to get, an antibiotic, I try to say to them, I try to be, sophisticated and say, I don't want a broad-based antibiotic. I want one that's specific. And I think when I asked the doctor there the last time, he says, nothing specific.
Well, that's not true. There are specific ones for
I know.
infections in your eyes, for urinary tract infections. There are some specific. It just happens to be that a lot of times the power that you need in the antibiotic to knock something out has to be a broad spectrum
Right,
one.
that's what they said, and that's exactly what I had. I had a bladder infection, and I asked for that because you almost don't want to take anything for it because that's other problems. But yeah, he said there's nothing specific. You got to take that statin thing that you just talked about. But I'm aware that they're saying, okay, so when you're taking this, then you're supposed to do something else to make sure the candida in the, the vagina doesn't grow up. But nobody ever talked about candida in the gut. This
That's
is
the
a
primary
really,
place
really
that it.
good conversation,
This is
right?
the primary place that Candida lives. It lives
Mm,
in it lives in the gut, which is about
wow.
50, arguably 50 feet,
Hmm.
because your colon is about 6 to 8 feet, your small intestine somewhere around 40.
Wow.
So you're dealing
Wow.
with about 50 feet that it's
That is
occupying,
that
ver-
is so sad
as
because you're
opposed to
telling
the
me, wait,
vaginal area, small,
small,
relatively.
right? Because you can get rid of those like creams and stuff like that that they
Right.
have to get rid of those things. Um, and usually when you get rid of them for the creams, they don't necessarily come back. Like the one that's in the gut. But so you've got this candida in the gut that for years nobody can get rid of until, researchers like yourself can get rid of it. So yeah, great. I didn't have any information about your book here, but yeah, I just remember. So I'm gonna definitely link out to it. And
You
I
can get
guess
my
it's
book on
easy.
Amazon. It's on
Yeah,
Amazon.
Candida Chronicles.
Candida
Right, but I
Chronicles
mean
on
it's
Amazon.
not in any of the information that your team sent me.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so it's good that I can link out to it because that sounds really, really good. So, so for someone that's listening right now who feels all the symptoms that you talked about earlier, they're tired and they're foggy, they're inflamed, and they're stuck in a cycle of supplements with no results, what's the first step that you recommend that they take?
They sit down with a piece of paper and a pencil, and they go back and they draw like a big line, long line. Go back to where you felt great, where you had no problems. Then start going forward. Identify where you started feeling bad. Then go back and see what you were doing and make notes, make a timeline. Timeline. Go back, see what happened. And odds are you're going to find out that sometime before, a few months, maybe a year before you started feeling bad, you were on antibiotics. You were on
Mm,
some kind of medication that wiped out your flora. You
mm.
had a surgery. You had dental work. You had something happen that compromised your flora. And then if you can remember what symptoms came first, you'll probably find that it's a similar line to what I was saying. You started getting tired, farting, burping, forgetting things, etc. And that would put you in a pretty good chance that you have candida. Next thing, look at your tongue in the mirror. Tongue's supposed to be pink. If your tongue is white or white and green and it has a lot of cracks, that's something called geographic tongue, which means you have bad flora.
I've heard of it. I heard of the tongue, in the tongue. In my country, we call it thrush. Right? You look
Well,
at your
now
tongue and it's white, right?
thrush, thrush is a little different now.
Is it a little different? Okay.
Little different. If you have a very white tongue or very white coating in your mouth,
Hmm.
that's mucus. When your mouth is painful and it's very hard to swallow because it hurts so much, and you look like you have cotton balls in your mouth, that's thrush.
That's thrush. Okay. All right. Well, yeah, the people in the old, the old wives' tale, they said everything is thrush when you put your, white tongue. I've never heard anybody that has all that other stuff that goes with it that just said it's thrush. But again, you're saying that that is a sign that you have bad
That you have
intestinal flora,
Candida. The
right?
Indians, American Indians, used to call it furry tongue.
Furry tongue, right?
Furry
Yeah.
tongue.
But it means that there's something wrong. But yeah, I mean, and when you go to the doctor, they're supposed to be able to pick that one up because they always tell you to open your mouth and looking down your throat, right? So you're supposed to pick that up. Okay,
They're supposed to,
so
yes.
so now that they've traced it back and they figured out that there was originating situation, then what they do next?
Well, now this is the hardest part. Now they have to find somebody who can treat them correctly. Because what happens, most doctors do this approach that I tried for years. It didn't work. And I call it the Ungapachka approach. It's a Yiddish term, Ungapachka, which means everything thrown together.
Mm.
So the doctor's going to give you probiotics. He's going to give you antifungals. He's going to give you vitamins. He's going to give you minerals. He's going to give you herbs that stimulate your immune system. He's going to try to detoxify your liver. He's going to do all of these things, thinking
Wow.
that this is going to make you healthy so you'll get rid of the candida. And all it does is make you broke and sick because you're spending tons of money on all this stuff that your body can't handle all at once. And
Mm.
you get sick because you're doing just so many things. You're overwhelming your system. And plus, a lot of the vitamins that they would give you interact badly with candida. Here's one of the tricks with candida. There are certain vitamins that feed candida and make it spread. And there are
Mm.
other vitamins that actually stop the antifungal medicines from working. They act like antidotes. So
Mm.
if you don't know this, you could be taking all these antifungals and stuff, but if you're also taking vitamins that are making the candida spread or vitamins that are neutralizing the antifungals you're taking, then you're not getting anywhere.
Wow. Wow. This is such an important conversation. I love it. I love it. Okay. So, all right. So, tell our listeners how they can learn more about this Candida and your work and how they can connect with you and your website and all those things.
So
Yeah, and I will definitely go pick up a copy of your book and maybe even get tested. Where are you?
so they would go on Amazon, Amazon.com, look for the Candida Chronicles. So now they have the book. Then they go on the internet. They can look me up on three websites, health-truth.com or the New York City Candida Doctor, and then also the New York City Thyroid Doctor. Now, the reason why I have a website about thyroid is because Candida and thyroid are heavily connected. And
Mm.
thyroid is one of the first things your Candida wants to beat up on in your body.
All right, give me the thyroid one again.
New York City Thyroid Doctor. So they can contact and reach me on any of those three websites.
Okay. All right. Wow. All right. So, and then if they go on, for instance, the New York City Candida doctor, then they can order your tests.
The website will direct them to my staff who will schedule them to speak to me, and then
Okay.
we'll see what tests they need to order because
Okay. All
there's a
right.
few different versions of all these tests, and we have
Okay.
to know which is the right version for that person based on their history.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm there because I need to get that done. Right. Because like you said, I just take all these vitamins because somebody says, okay, you need vitamin E, then I take that. Someone else says you need vitamin C, so I take that. Someone else says that you need, the only one I haven't purchased is that CQ10 because it's too darn expensive.
Okay.
But I take everything else.
Well,
I even added turmeric recently because somebody says, "Oh, that's good anti-inflammatory," So I take everything else. So, but I'm glad that the people that are listening don't throw out their multivitamins because it's a waste of time. All that. So
in all honesty, you're probably better off taking the vitamin than not when you consider the shape that the food's been in the last 20, 30
yeah, there are
years.
no vitamins in them.
When you
Right.
consider the toxicity in your environment, if I had a bet one way or another, I would take the vitamin. But
Yeah.
knowing also that if you take too much of something you don't need, it throws you out of a balance, it
Right.
makes you want to investigate more.
Right, right. Yeah. My problem is sleep. And I'm thinking that I was even thinking recently that there must be something that I'm doing that makes me, it's got to be more than menopause, which is basically what my doctor just says. Oh, it's just menopause. But I said, it's got to be something more than that it's affecting. So, yeah, I definitely want
So
to
did your
understand.
doctor test your cortisol levels?
Yeah, they test that. The cortisol is fine.
Okay. And now I bet you he tested it in the morning with a blood test.
Probably. Yes,
Yep.
because it's a fasting test, right?
Right. Which is not the
Wrong
way you
time?
test, not the way you do it. The way you test cortisol is either with a saliva test or a urine test that you take a sample every few hours. So you want to know what your cortisol levels are when you go to bed. You want to know what they are in the middle of the night. You want to know
Hmm,
what they are in the morning. And you
hmm,
also want to know what your melatonin levels are.
Yeah.
Melatonin's the
Got
hormone
none
that
of
puts you to
those because
sleep.
I have to
Yep.
take melatonin to sleep. I ain't got none.
Okay, so melatonin puts you to sleep and keeps you to sleep, and cortisol wakes you up.
Hmm.
So you've got to know what those levels are from the time you go to bed to the time you wake up in the morning or get out of bed in the morning in order to make sense of what's going on. That's why doing a blood test for it in the morning isn't telling you anything.
Not doing anything, right? Just says, "Oh, your cortisol levels is good," which is what I got. Okay, listen. I am definitely going to be seeking consultation with you, Dr. Biamonte. And listen, you guys that are listening, I hope that this conversation opened your eyes because yeah, the story that he talked, Dr. Biamonte shared with the gentleman with the prostate issue and the zinc and the copper. I mean, I didn't even know that there was copper supplements until right now. But yeah, and I don't take zinc. Maybe I need to.
You can find out by testing you.
Yes, excellent. All right, so I've got your websites. I've got the name of your book. I'm going to link out to it on the show notes. And what are your social media handles? So anyone wants to follow you.
I'm sorry, I didn't get that.
What's your social media or Instagram?
Oh,
Uh,
we're on Instagram. It's Dr. Biamonte.
Okay, just your name,
Yeah,
right?
it's just my
Okay,
name on Instagram, on Facebook. Or you can look for the Biamonte Center.
okay,
Facebook, we have a lot of pages. Biamonte Center, we have me,
okay.
bunch of them. So just look for the name.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful. I'll also link out to that because this is good information. I love it when I bring quality guests and quality information to make I'm transitioning into a longevity health span podcast. So this is great information, great information. All right, so as we wrap up, this episode reminds us that healing isn't about piling more things in your body like I do. It's about understanding what's truly out of balance. So if this conversation resonated with you, share it with someone who's struggling silently, right? Dr. Biamonte gave us some examples of actually a very good example. You're brain fog, you can't remember things, you're allergic to, not allergic, but you're inflamed about everything, and you almost become like a bubble person where you can't go outside because everything is like a domino effect spiraling. So if you know someone that's struggling with their health and having any of these issues that we talked about, you're tired, you're foggy, you're inflamed, and you just keep pouring supplements on and it's not working, then share this episode with them and so that they can get in contact with Dr. Biamonte and get testing. All right. So, and of course, I want to, remind you to subscribe so you never miss an episode of Transform Your Mind. So, Dr. Biamonte, this was a fantastic conversation. I learned so much, things that I never knew before, and I thought I knew a lot. And
You
so it
did. You
was
did know a lot.
lovely, lovely conversation. Love talking to you. So, as we wrap up, any last words for our listeners and those watching on TV?
Yes. The best thing you can do for your health is try to eat organic, non-GMO. Even before you worry about supplements, try to stick to real food. The food pyramid was just redone.
No.
Yep, the food pyramid was just completely redone. It's basically turned upside down.
Huh.
Because what we need to be eating is real food,
Yeah.
vegetables,
Well, everybody
fruits,
knows that. Whole
organic,
food. Nothing in cans, right? I
right,
think they
right,
know that.
and stick to organic and non-GMO. Non-GMO is very important because
Yeah.
GMO foods are poison.
Yeah, yeah. And they're sneaking them in quite a bit now
Well,
with
that's
this
from Bill
GMO
Bill
stuff.
Gates.
Oh, I'm sorry?
Bill Gates is behind that.
He's sneaking in the GMO foods?
Yep,
Huh.
and vaccinations, and he's trying to put vaccinations in the water supply. It's just watch out for him. Bad
Oh,
news.
wow. I thought he was a good guy.
No, bad guy. Bad, bad, bad.
Wow, wow, wow. Yes. All right. So do you cover this new food chain in your book?
Oh, no, not in the book. That this just occurred in the last few weeks.
Oh, wow. So how do we get that information?
Just Google it, new food chain, or the new
Okay.
food pyramid, actually.
Okay. All right. All right, awesome. I'm on that one too because I need to know. All right, guys. Well, listen, thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of Transform Your Mind so you can transform your life. Today, we were definitely talking about supplementation, deficiencies, the gut-mind connection, and you might not have heard that before, Candida in the gut. We always know that they're in women's health issues, but now they're Candida is in the gut. And the bad thing about the Candida in the gut, according to Dr. Biamonte, that it's very hard to get rid of the sucker. It just keeps coming back. So go pick up a copy of Dr. Biamonte's book. It is called The Candida Chronicles. I will link out to it in the show notes. I'll link out to his websites in the show notes and his social media handles so you can follow and get more information. So thank you for being on the show. Thank you for this life-changing information. And thank you guys for tuning in. So as we wrap up, until next time, namaste.